Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In today's video, we're going to be discussing a couple of things, both pertaining to the powerful dark wizard, Lord Voldemort. First, we'll be looking at whether or not the Death Eaters were actually aware of the fact that he was a half-blood, and next, we'll be discussing how accepting the Death Eaters would be of a half-blood in their ranks. When it comes to dark witches and wizards, the Death Eaters are as bad as they come. Followers of Lord Voldemort who obeyed his every bidding in an effort to cleanse the wizarding world. They were a group of pure-blood radical supremacists, ever-bloodthirsty and always more than eager to incite fear in the hearts of their enemies. But what's ironic about the Death Eaters is that their founder and leader was a filthy half-blood himself, their words not mine. In fact, the Death Eaters were originally formed when Tom Riddle still attended Hogwarts, between the years 1938 and 1945. However, Tom's group in school were just the precursor to what we now know as Death Eaters. Back then, they were called the Knights of Walpurgis. The Knights of Walpurgis was a group comprised of exclusively Slytherin students, as many of their core goals and perspectives as a group coincided with the beliefs of Slytherin House. These students were certainly a bit morally dubious, and Dumbledore once described Riddle's gang as a mixture of the weak seeking protection, the ambitious seeking glory, and the thuggish seeking a leader who could show them more refined cruelty. Voldemort was messed up. I don't think that's something you could argue, but what I find so curious is that he amassed legions of followers to pursue a cause that, by definition, would enslave himself. Voldemort would always refer negatively to his parentage over the course of the books, films, and we find out fairly quickly that Voldemort's father was indeed a Muggle. He liked to pretend that he wasn't associated with his parents at all, but there's no escaping your heritage. However, the books and films are a little bit conflicted on whether or not Voldemort's followers, the Death Eaters, were actually aware of his heritage. After all, is the level of disdain that they felt towards non-purebloods actually real if they knowingly follow a half-blood? Did they know Voldy's dark, dirty secret? When Tom Riddle was first sorted into Slytherin, he was still just a young boy, a confused young boy that grew up in an orphanage. He knew nothing of his heritage, but this void of knowledge quickly became his obsession, and in Chapter 17 of The Half-Blood Prince, it's revealed that he quickly became obsessed with it. Because he had grown up in an orphanage, he grew increasingly curious as he aged. It was only natural that he sought answers, as any orphan would, and he began looking for clues within the school. It seems he searched in vain for some trace of Tom Riddle Sr. on the shields in the trophy room, on the lists of prefects in the old school records, even in the books on wizarding history. Finally, he was forced to accept that his father had never set foot in Hogwarts. It was actually Voldemort's uncle, Morfin Gaunt, that eventually revealed his true heritage to him. In the same chapter of The Half-Blood Prince, there is the following exchange between the two. "I thought you was that Muggle," whispered Morfin. "You look mighty like that Muggle." "What Muggle?" said Riddle sharply. "That Muggle what my sister took a fancy to. That Muggle what lives in the big house over the way," said Morfin, and he spat unexpectedly upon the floor between them. "You look right like him, Riddle. But he's older now, ain't he? He's older than you, now I think on it." Using this dialogue, we can infer that Voldemort became truly aware of his heritage sometime around the age of 15. There are a few parts of the books, films, that sort of suggest that the Death Eaters knew of his heritage, though it is never stated directly. To delve into this further, I'm going to start with a segment from page 231 of the Chamber of Secrets, where Voldemort reveals that some of his intimate friends at school knew of both his old and new identity. He pulled Harry's wand from his pocket and began to trace it through the air, writing 3 shimmering words: Tom Marvolo Riddle. Then he waved to the wand once, and the letters of his name rearranged themselves. "I am Lord Voldemort." "You see," he whispered, "it was a name I was already using at Hogwarts, to my most intimate friends only, of course. You think I was going to use my filthy Muggle father's name forever?" What this tells us is that some of Tom Riddle's closest friends were aware of both names, which confirms that there were people he went to school with that knew of his heritage. However, while it is likely that these same individuals went on to become Death Eaters, that's not confirmed. Additionally, in Chapter 23 of The Half-Blood Prince, it is revealed that fellow Slytherins found it amusing that Voldemort's father was a Muggle. despite the fact that he was a descendant of Salazar Slytherin himself. This suggests that it was never a secret among his peers that he was a half-blood. This leads us to our next and more important question. Who did he go to school with, and did they go on to become Death Eaters? A line from page 463 of The Half-Blood Prince gives us a clue. Good gracious, is it that time already? You'd better get going, boys, or we'll all be in trouble. Lestrange, I want your essay by tomorrow, or it's detention. Same goes for you, Avery. The above passage mentions the names of both Lestrange and Avery, both of whom, we know, go on to become Death Eaters. If they went to school at the same time as Voldemort, and we know that they become Death Eaters later on, it is fair to assume that they would qualify as the intimate friends that Voldemort had previously mentioned. By Lestrange, I am of course referring to the ancestor of Rodolphus Lestrange, the Lestrange that we know to be married to Bellatrix. In chapter 35 of the Order of the Phoenix, Harry mentions Voldemort's real name, Tom Riddle, to Bellatrix, which seems to enrage her. "You dare speak his name, you filthy half-blood," she responds. To me, this pretty much confirms that Bellatrix, one of the oldest Death Eaters, is fully aware of Riddle's real name and background. But I wonder, what of the rest of the Death Eaters? Bellatrix was at the top of Voldemort's ranks and his right-hand woman, so it only makes sense that she would know. But some of the Death Eaters, though they followed him loyally, were nothing but ants to Voldemort, insignificant, disposable soldiers. Would he disclose his deep, dark secret to them? Did they know? As it turns out, probably. In the Goblet of Fire, Voldemort addresses all of the Death Eaters in a long monologue. In his monologue, he discusses his need to acquire his father's bone to regenerate, and the necessity to travel to Little Hangleton, where his grave was located. The books imply repeatedly that Little Hangleton is a small Muggle community, which is definitely not a place that a pure-blood family would live. Also, Voldemort's father's gravestone clearly reads Riddle, so if the Death Eaters didn't already know that Voldemort was a half-blood, this would have been a dead giveaway, as they would have been easily able to recognize that Riddle was not the name of a known pure-blood family. So now that we know that the Death Eaters were all more than likely aware of his pure-blood status, this begs the question, why did they accept him despite being a half-blood? Why did they follow him when by doing so, it almost contradicts their core values as Death Eaters? I think it comes down to a couple of things. First of all, though he was a half-blood, Voldemort was still technically the heir of Slytherin, the founding father of Slytherin House. Slytherin was the one who perpetuated the anti-Muggle purist views in the first place, and he was heavily respected among Slytherins, the students most likely to become Death Eaters. As Voldemort was his descendant, it only makes sense that this would, in a way, balance out his half-blood status. Next, Voldemort condemned his family. In fact, Voldemort pretty much killed every trace of family that he had left, all in an effort to leave his old life behind him. It was clear that Voldemort was a devout follower of his own cause, and this further proved that. Voldemort's passion and willingness to eradicate any trace of his Muggle heritage proved that he was the real deal, and I'm sure that the Death Eaters respected that. The last and most important point worth mentioning is that Voldemort was simply too powerful to question. Sure, they could have spoken up against him, but if they did, I doubt they would have stuck around for much longer. His power was alluring, and this is one of the reasons that Peter Pettigrew changed allegiances. Regardless of what you thought of him, he was this imposing figure that would seemingly eventually dominate the wizarding world. If you can't beat him, join him. And that's it for this video. If you enjoyed the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, sometimes we have to choose between what is right and what is easy.